Hello, everybody, and welcome to the draft power rankings for our Blastburn Radio Community Draft League, the Invitational Draft League, which is where our more seasoned veteran competitors come out to play. This is the first in a series of these power rankings because we are doing a very kind of cool and interesting draft format this season. We're calling it multi-draft, where we did our draft like you do in a draft league, and we're going to play about 4 weeks with that team, and then we're going to do it again and then again. There's going to be 3 total drafts for each team in this season, and we're going to do a power ranking for each of them. And when I say we, I mean we, because it's not just me here today. I want to welcome my co-hosts on the mic for this particular video, which include our good friend, co-host, and show producer, Poke Ranger Pat. Say hi to everybody, Pat.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
And also with us is community moderator and the guy who makes the drafts happen on a very fundamental level, our good friend Flame and Air. Everybody say hi to Flame.
Hello. I do a bit less of it these days, but definitely still become probably more involved than I should be given what else I have going on.
Sometimes it'd be like that. Absolutely. Now we are only going to be power ranking the Invitational League this time around, at least. That is primarily just due to the linear nature of time as we experience it as humans, because I'm also doing the Blastburn Radio X and Y series, and it's just too fucking much. I can only produce so much content for y'all. So I figured that power ranking our invitational draft, which is where the more experienced players are, would be more productive for everyone, because even for our D-League competitors, you can watch this and get some ideas for what you may have done well or not as well yourself, or what you could do differently or better in the next draft. So I hope that this is like an informative and educational experience for all involved, and fun, and lots of bragging rights and shit talking will of course be on the table. Now on that note, I do have a couple of how do presentation work. That's how presentation works. I got a couple disclaimers for you guys just right off the top. And first and foremost, this is a subjective ranking. What we have done here is we have ranked our 12 invitational teams from best to worst based on our own individual criteria. This is what we think is good and works well. It's probably not the same as what you think is good and works well, and that's totally fine. This is not meant to be a definitive list. This is not meant to be I am right, you are wrong, listen to me. This is just for each of us individually, our opinions on what looks really strong in this particular league. And I'm sure that even among the 3 of us, we have very different definitions of what those things are. These rankings are based on the teams as they exist on paper, the Pokemon that have been drafted. Coaching skill and play style of individuals is not factored in whatsoever, and this is really important because there are teams in this draft that I look at and go, that would be a nightmare to use. I think that that's awful, but I know that there are people who just play that way and it will work for them. And so again, this is not a predictor of success. This is simply us giving our opinions on the teams themselves as removed from the people who drafted them as is possible for us as humans to separate, right? Anytime we criticize these teams, those criticisms are intended to be constructive and educational. They are not intended to be mean-spirited or punching down. If they are interpreted that way at any point, I'm just going to preemptively apologize for that, because that is not what we are here to do. We are simply here to have some fun, and hopefully to, again, provide a learning experience for the people who were in this draft, and for people who are in our developmental league, and for people who have nothing to do with our community draft league, who are just interested in draft format. Hopefully this is educational and fun for you guys as well. And then lastly, we are going to be going through these by their official ranking, and those official rankings are aggregate. So what we've done is we've averaged, if I ranked the team at number 12, Flame ranked them at number 5, and Pat ranked them at number 7. I've added together 12, 7, 5, divided it by 3, and then put those those aggregate scores in order from low points, which would equal high rankings, to high points, which would equal low rankings. So there are places on this list that I vehemently disagree with, and that is going to be true for Pat and Flame as well, and we'll certainly talk about those things. But just want to be very, very clear that these rankings do not reflect any of our individual opinions. They reflect the collective opinion as interpreted by math. Thank you, math. So yeah, do you guys have anything else you'd like to throw out before we jump in?
No.
Not really. My rankings probably may have thrown things off a bit because I'm not the most knowledgeable about competitive, though I feel like I say that with most of the stuff that we do here, and it gets less credible each time, so we'll see.
Yeah, our boy Flame is much more likely to be like, I like the level of fluffiness on this team. This is a good team. I like this team.
I didn't do food rankings this time.
Not this time. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate because I feel like I actually would have scored very well in that category. Okay, that's fine.
I mean, I can pull some off the cuff.
No,
I don't have the hard numbers to back it up.
It's fine. It's good. Okay, so with that, let's just go ahead and jump into it. And jumping into it at number 12, we have our good friend Kerfungal and his Sanibel Salazzles. Now, just for record, for knowledge, I had actually ranked the Salazzles at 9th in my personal list. They showed up at 11th of 11 in Pat's list. Pat and I did not rank our own teams, so our lists are a little bit shorter. And they did come in 12th on your list, Flame. So this is pretty spot on from your opinion. Do you want to start off with your thoughts on this team?
Yeah, and I guess a good point of note is that the way that I came to my rankings, I just team and kind of tried to figure out approximately where it would fit from 1 to 12 and ended up with like 3 groups of 4. And I think that between them, they can kind of move around. I put Kerfungals towards the bottom here because I don't like it as much. I don't like Lando T personally, so that may have had a bit of a factor there. But one of the things that I noticed is that there isn't a lot here that stands out to me as having a lot of synergy necessarily. There are some things that have maybe some like strong aspects of themselves, like Landers has some powerful things it can do, Cartana has some powerful things it can do, but there was nothing that stood out to me necessarily as like, oh well, these work really well together, or you know, this is kind of like a nice defensive core that it has, or anything like that. So there just wasn't anything that I saw that really stood out to me as like, oh, I really like this. And I mean, when it comes down to it, all of the teams, especially in iLeague, I kept looking at it and going like, well, how do I, like, who goes on the bottom here? Because I kept looking and trying to find a bad one, and I couldn't. I actually complained to you about that. But yeah, this one just ended up at 12 because I couldn't find anything that stood out to me from it. Like, there's nothing bad about it. But I feel like Kerfungal, you know, did the meme first pick of Turdinator, and sometimes you live by the meme and you die by the meme, so rank 12 it is. I
think that is definitely really true here. Not that they're... Look, we were all extremely excited when Kerfungal spent his first overall pick on Turtonator. Like, I'm not gonna downplay that. And somehow we still let this mad lad wind up with Lando T and Cartana. Which just says we're all bad at this, honestly. But when I look at this team, there are 4 quad weaknesses spread among 3 Pokemon here. You've got Landorus T, which is famously quad weak to ice. You've got Cartana, which is quad weak to fire. You've got Frostmoth, which is quad weak to both fire and rock, because Ice Bug is maybe the worst typing in existence, as much as I love my sweet, sweet cold moth friend. It's not...
Grass Bug might be up there.
It's not good.
As another type.
Yeah. That's fair. I guess at least ice is good offensive typing. Fair.
It's really that defensively, yeah.
It's a problem, and unfortunately, with as big of a problem as those types are defensively for Kerfungal, for these Salazzles, like the only consistent switch in that he has to either of them, to either the ice or the fire, is Suicune. I mean, Turtonator can switch into fire really well. It quad resists fire, so credit where credit's due there. But I feel like a stronger and more consistent fire type to switch into ice attacks would have been a real credit to this team and would have boosted it a lot for me. I probably would have taken something over the Espeon slot in the C tier personally, because to me, for my money, Espeon and Jolteon in conjunction are just really redundant. They fill very similar roles. They're both very fast Mon with cleric options, like fast offensive clerics, and you don't super need both of them at the end of the day. So I probably would have taken a fire type in C tier over one of them or the other, probably over Espeon personally. But yeah, like Suicune is an incredible defensive wall. It is basically the entire defensive backbone of this team, and that's just too large a job for one Pokemon, no matter how good.
Yeah, and that's actually a good bit of why he's low on my ranking also. There's just a lot of frailty in the team. Like Jolteon, Espeon, Lycanroc, Rabombi, they're not all that hardy. And yeah, and when you've only got like Suicune, you're almost like backed into running a bulky Landorus.
Yeah.
And maybe Turtonator. That's rough.
And that's a really solid point as well. Like Lando is one of those Pokemon that can run so many different types of sets. Like, it's called Team Glue in singles competitive for a reason, because if you need something on your team, Landorus can probably be that something with the proper set. But like, this is a very similar problem that I had in UPPL when we ran that draft league, and I ran Mew and did sort of really pretty solid effect. But Mew was so far and away like my best bulky Stealth Rocks option that I almost always had to bring it as a bulky rocker, because I just didn't have another answer for that role. And yeah, I definitely agree that it feels like Kerfungal has almost backed himself into a corner where like the really great like Double Dance or offensive Scarf Landos just don't make a lot of sense with this team composition. Again, credit where credit's due. There is some like incredible Volt Turn offensive synergy on this team with Jolteon and Landorus, and even Rabombi, who you don't really think of as being like obviously like a U-turn threat, but absolutely is with the right set. Obviously the U-turn from Rabombi being less about damage and more about momentum with the pivoting. Like there is a lot to love here, and if played really well as a hyper offense core, like this team can and will win games, and I don't mean to imply otherwise, but I think that there's definitely a strong argument for it being this low with its general overall frailty and fairly glaring type weaknesses.
I agree.
Yeah. So with that note, moving on to number 11, I apologize for the team logo. This is the only team in our iLeague draft without a dedicated logo of any varying quality, so I literally just
nothing to apologize for.
I literally just Google searched for Netherlands Pokemon, and this is what we found. So this is the new official team logo of Okan Algoz and the Dutch Devils. Okan drafting from the top down, Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Hydreigon, Scizor, Raikou, Hatterene, Ditto, Alolan Marowak, Shuckle, Dugtrio, and Glaceon. Now, I had originally ranked this team 10 of 11 on my list. It was 9 of 11 on Pat's and 10 of 12 on Flames. So all pretty consistent with it being down there in that quadrant. Pat, do you want to start us off talking about this team?
Sure. My first complaint about this team is Ditto, because I hate it. But it is incredibly versatile. Overall, I like a lot of the Mon on this team individually. Let's see. I've got stuff up here. Yeah, so part of it was part of my problem was how top heavy it is. there's a lot of power up front, but once you get into some of the lower stuff, it's kind of like Doug Trio. You can't arena trap, so it's not nearly as useful as it would be otherwise. Glaceon being an ice type really hurts it because of how frail ice type is. Shuckle is a great defensive option, and it's hard to break through, but that's pretty much all it does.
So I agree in broad strokes. I think that Glaceon is actually a really good value for the tier that it's in. Like, yes, Ice is a bad defensive typing. Its defensive stats are not bad by any stretch. And it has access to the same like great clericking combinations of Wish, Heal, Bell, Protect that all of the evolutions have. It gets access to Freeze Dry. Like, it's not a bad value for where it lands. The problem for me is that the defensive backbone of this team is Glaceon Shuckle, and you really want some higher value, some higher potency walls, I think, to pivot into. Again, this is another hyper offense team that just... And again, it does those things very, very well. You've got U-turn on Hydreigon, you've got U-turn on Scizor, you've got Volt Switch on Raikou, and that's a hell of a Volt Turn combo, right? You can do a lot just with that combination. But when you're outsped and you're looking at a KO, there is no, well, I'm going to switch into my wall and eat the hit. It's just, okay, who's going to die at this point? And I feel like that's a really unfortunate position to put yourself in all the time. I also don't super love for this team that its only options for hazard removal are Hydreigon or Scizor with Defog. You do, admittedly, you have Hatterene with Magic Bounce to prevent the hazards from going up in the first place, and that's not nothing. But generally speaking, you don't want to waste a move slot on your Scizor or your Hydreigon with Defog, or at least you don't want to be forced into doing so if you want to have it. And in particular with Shuckle, like Shuckle is such a great mon for getting sticky webs up, and this team with its hyper offensive nature benefits so much from web support that it's a real shame to be like, well, I have to get rid of rocks on my end, so I guess I'm going to defog my own webs away. This team is begging for rapid spin, and it just doesn't have it, and that's kind of a problem. Again, a lot to love here. The combination of Scizor and Hydreigon is incredible. Hydreigon obviously having that big glaring quad fairy weakness, and Scizor being the punisher of fairy types is incredibly good. The Psychic Dark Fairy and Fantasy cores here are incredible, or the Psychic Dark Fighting, excuse me, and Fantasy cores are both extremely good, with Hydreigon and Hatterene, and then Urshifu and Scizor respectively. And Ditto is an absolutely game-changing mod. Like, you cannot bring a setup threat into a game against Okan with this roster without having a strategy for how do I deal with it when he just Dittos my setup sweeper. It is one of those mon that absolutely dictates the way you prep for it, and that has a ton of value. I would have really loved to see like a big bulky regenerator wall on the top end of this draft. Honestly, you could probably get rid of Urshifu for Toxapex and get a lower level fighting type, and this would immediately be one of the teams to beat, I think.
Absolutely, like that would change the whole makeup of this team.
Yeah, all I said there's that pretty much I had the same thoughts, that there isn't any good defensive kind of pivots in here other than Shuckle, that the slower nature of singles kind of makes that really a difficult prospect. I learned that kind of the hard way in our past draft seasons. When you don't have a good option to switch into, it can be really difficult to kind of keep ahead on the game. So that's kind of what put it at this rank for me.
Yeah. Well, very good, very good. Now, our next team actually tied is also ranked at number 10, and that is our good friend Miss Darizard and her Olivine City Volties. And guys, this is how you know how good the teams in this draft are, because this is not a team that you would look at in any world, I think, and go, yes, that deserves to be in the bottom third of this list. But here we are. Dari's team consists, as you can see on your screen, of Mew, Vanillux, Tapu Koko, Halucha, Beartic, Doublade, Sharpedo, Type Null, Claydol, and Guzzlord. I'll go ahead and start us here. It'll be my turn. It'll be your boy Jolly's turn. So again, this team is really cool, and it's really, really like offensively threatening. Obviously, the Hail Core of Vanillux and Beartic is really, really powerful, as is the combination of Tapu Koko, who is just an incredible mon all on its own right, and then of course the Halucha, who can run Unburden and just go fast like Sanic with Electric Seed under electric terrain. Those are some incredible options to go extremely fast on this team, and those are unquestionably really, really solid. A couple of things that I looked at when looking at this team. Number one of them being, again, I have used Mew in draft. Mew is a great Pokemon in draft. When I look at Dari's team, discounting the Mew, her rock setter is Claydol. Discounting the Mew, her options for removal are Defog on Tapu Koko, and maybe Halucha. I forget if Halucha gets Defog. You certainly don't want to really run Defog on either of them very often, though, or Rapid Spin on Claydol, which means that a lot of the times, if Dari wants Defog or if Dari wants Rocks, they're going on the Mew, and that really limits the really cool diverse options that Mew has, when Mew is also like your far and away your best hazards option. So that's just a little unfortunate.
I'm pretty sure Type Null gets Defog also.
No, Silvally does. Type Null does not. I checked.
Oh, I was unaware of that.
Yeah, unless I am just fucking wrong, but I literally, and here, I'll do it again. I will go to Type Null on Cerebi, pull up its generation. Actually, I'll leave it on generation 7 in case it was available in Gen 7 and not in Gen 8, and thus is available on a transfer, which is possible. I search for Defog, and there are no hits. Defog is not on this page. So yeah,
They'll all be.
I would feel much better about it if Type Null got Defog, but unfortunately that's not the case here. That being said, like Defog Tapu Koko, not bad. Like Tapu Koko, of all the options on here, can reasonably frequently spare the move slot for Defog. But again, that's also backing you into a corner on how you build your Tapu Koko at that point. I would have preferred like a bulky flying type somewhere on this team to help lower that burden. Also, just pointing out in general, like having a weather core on your team is usually a really, really good thing. Hail, I think, is unquestionably the worst weather to lean into, and having 2 pure ice types on your team is a real problem defensively. It's something that you're going to struggle with, and like not to put Dari's whole deal on blast here, but you've got 2 pure ice types, 2 dark types, and a normal type. Fighting says hello. Frankly, at the end of the day, you've also, on top of that, got a fairy, a flying, a ghost, and a psychic who give two psychics actually who give not a single fuck about fighting. But it's just one of those things, right? We only have 10 Pokemon, and when you start stacking the same types, you're stacking the same weaknesses, and that presents its own problems. Beartic also, as a mon that I've used in draft before, goes respectably fast in the Hail, doesn't go as fast as you want a Weather Sweeper to go, and that can have problems of its own. Overall, I think this is a really strong team. I think that it fits Dari's playstyle really well, and I'm excited to see what she does with it. But there were enough glaring holes for me, or at least holes that I consider to be glaring, that I felt that it merited a relatively low position. Let's see, on my personal list, this one ranked 8 of 11. On Pat's, it ranked 10th, and on Flames, it ranked 11 of 12. So yeah, that's my thoughts. How about you guys?
When I look at this team. Oh,
Okay. You're cutting in and out a little bit, but I can hear you.
okay. Yeah, when I looked at this team, it just, a lot of it felt incomplete. And the parts that were complete felt like they were completed on the low end. So like you look at the different cores, you've got your Fairy Steel Dragon, and you're starting that with Tapu Koko, which is baller, obviously. But then you're filling that with Eviolite Double Blade and go. Double defense, but rough. I don't want to say rough on the recordings of sub or constant lower tiers. He fighting Dark Psychic, which got Mew and Palucha, awesome. And then your Dark is Guzzlord or Sharpedo. It feels incomplete to me. Another thing, you were talking about defensive options, right there with you. Like Claydol's okay, Eviolite Doublade, and you're probably gonna be running a bulky Mew most of it.
Yeah, and Eviolite type null is very good. Like, it's very good. And I certainly don't want to discount that even a little bit. I'm actually really interested to see what Dari can pull off with type null this season, because I think that it's a criminally underused Pokemon in our drafts, at least. But yeah, like, for me, it feels like the problems start at the top down, that when you invest 2 reasonably high picks in pure ice types, and I recognize that is directly my fault because I took Dari's Hail Setter away from her. But yeah, I feel like last season I fell into this hole where we were drafting live, and I made some decisions because my plan got disrupted earlier in the draft that led me to struggle a little bit down the stretch, and I feel like Dari may have done a little bit of the same, but I hope she can pull it out. Again, I see a lot to like here, and I know how she plays, and I think that she can pilot it really well. I'm just curious to see how these first couple of weeks go for her.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Those are the big things for me, is that overall the Hail, as far as weather goes, is kind of the weakest one, is for my opinion. And I really don't like Beartic as a kind of sweeper just because it is so slow. Like, yeah, Swatch Thrust does make it twice as fast, but then it's still not that fast.
Honestly, I kind of wish that she had gone for Arctozolt as her Hail Sweeper. I think would have fit really well because it would have benefited not only from the hail but also from Tapu Koko's electric terrain. I think would have been like a really, really cool synergy. But obviously that's not the timeline we're living in.
Yeah, like Koko Lucha is really good, and I do think that part of what might make this team seem worse on paper is I think that Daria might have looked specifically at what the 4 people she is facing were drafting and built towards that. We're not considering that here. We are looking at overall strength, so it's possible that she has options here that are really great for the specific people that she is facing, and we're just not seeing it. But I know from kind of checking out her stream that there were a couple picks that she was looking at for specific things, so that's definitely part of what some of these picks may have that might make her team weaker from an overall standpoint, but might end up helping her out actually when it comes to her matches, which is an interesting aspect of this kind of redraft format that we have.
Oh, 100%. When you only have to bring this team against 3 or 4 other teams, you can get much more granular, especially as the draft wears on with your late picks. I employed a couple of strategies with my picks in their orders specifically to take advantage of that. So yeah, not a surprise to know that others would have as well. And that's a very solid point. We're looking at this under a very general lens, whereas it was selected with very specific purpose. And that's always worth remembering. Now coming in at number 9 with our next roster is our good buddy LA Caveman and the Norfolk Kinglers. LA, I love you, buddy. I think this is a really cool team. You took the bottom spot in my personal rankings. I had you at 11 of 11, but you did much, much better with both Flame and Pat. Pat putting the Norfolk Kinglers at 8 of 11, and Flame, the boy with nothing but faith in your boy LA Caveman, putting it at number 2.
I really like this team.
Yeah, so start us off, buddy. Tell me what you like, what you see in this team.
I don't know. I guess maybe it's just like the kind of team that I would sort of draft, but it kind of like, I don't know, just looking at the top end here, like you have Heatran, Tapu Bulu, and Kingdra there, and I just, like, you have that Fantasy Core and the Firewater Grass Core neatly tied up there. One of the things that I suppose is a criticism here is you don't have a way to necessarily enable that rain for Kingdra, but if you're not trying to necessarily use it as Swift Swim, you do have other options there. So I think it's, still workable. Galvantula is really nice. Very powerful kind of web setter and, strong in its own right. Super accurate Thunder with Compound Eyes. You have Tauros and Nidoking with the option to do, Sheer Force. So that's a fun time there. Tauros also gets, Anger Point?
It's Anger Point and Intimidate. Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of really interesting ability stuff you can do with Tauros there. I mean, Intimidate is incredibly useful. He does have Surf Etch there, which gets Grassy Glide to work with Tapu Bulu. And I don't know, I just kind of liked it. I thought he had a really good team.
I will admit, I literally did not realize that Surf Etch got Grassy Glide. That is actually really cool.
It's...
All right, Pat, what about you, buddy? What do you think of this team?
I think it's solid. I really like the dual Fire, Water, Grass Fantasy Core. So it does become predictable. You know almost certainly that those 3 are going to come each week. The speed tiers aren't ideal, with your fastest one being Tauros at base 110, but you do have webs to help counteract that, which is nice. And I like the fact that you can still run Swift Swim Kingdra and take advantage if your opponent has a rain setter. Being able to turn an opponent's strategy against them really tickles me. A lot of it though, I like the main core, and I like the pieces around. I like the Shield Orb combination. It is very good. The Legends King, I think, is really cool. Really bulky pivot, pick up toxic spikes, and I was looking around, and it does actually get belly drum, which is just a fun time. Also, I really love Galarian Moltres, and my biggest thing is that there's so much of it concentrated on 3 Pokemon that are going to be coming every time. But I like the team overall.
That's fair. And I do think there is a lot to like here. I think there are a lot of cool strategies in this team. It is begging for a weather setter for Kingdra. Like I get the appeal in getting your Fire, Water, Grass and your Fantasy Core out of the way in 3 Pokemon. Although again, as you both already pointed out, that also makes it really predictable that those 3 Pokemon are going to come. Kingdra is not worth the C tier pick that he costs. without weather. Like, without the weather gimmick, Kingdra is a D tier mon at best. You're just not getting good value out of that spot. You're not getting good value out of your bulky water in having it be a Kingdra without weather. There's also the problem here that of your high tier, high value picks, 3 of them are ground weaknesses. And like, yes, obviously Tapu Bulu, grassy terrain, reduces the damage of Earthquake. That's fantastic. The last 2 generations have increased the distribution of moves like Drill Run and High Horsepower. And obviously there's Earth Power to such a degree that's more of an inconvenience than an actual like strategic factor these days. Which is just a real problem, I think, overall. If you replaced one of the B tier picks on this team with Pelipper, I think it immediately becomes a much stronger team. Like maybe replace the Galarian Moltres, as much as I think Galarian Moltres is cool and rad, with Pelipper, and then replace Nidoking with something that doesn't share that poison typing with the Galarian Slowking, and immediately I think this is a top tier draft team. It's just lacking a couple of synergies and missing a couple of pieces. I think that it needs to really and truly shine, but there's still a lot of good here, and this is definitely a team that is totally capable of winning games. Yeah. All right. Well, moving on. At number 8, we have first-time competitor, not new to the community, but new to our draft, Liger Lord, and the Liger, and the Waikato Chestnuts. Liger is a seasoned draft competitor, has competed in the Puckle Draft League historically. Sorry about the screen flashing. I need to stop moving my goddamn mouse. But this is his first Blastburn Radio draft, and has put together certainly what I think is an interesting roster, consisting of Jirachi, Galarian Zapdos, Mamoswine, Rotom Heat, Slow King, Silvally, Whimsicott, Dragalge, Alolan, I want to say Alolan Meowth, Alolan Persian, and Mawile. So looking at this team, I had them ranked at 5 of 11. So did you, Pat, actually. We both slotted them at number 5. Flame slotted them a little bit lower at number 8. Pat, do you want to start us out? Why don't you tell us what you think of this team?
Sure. I like the team. One thing that I saw immediately was a very fun, a very good coverage of speed tiers. You've got everything from 30 in Slowking up to 116 in Whimsicott, and you got 2 base 100s, another 115, and a couple of 90s and 80s. So it felt like it had a very good speed distribution. You've also got a good bit of priority with Mamo, and I know Mawile gets some priority. Jirachi is a thing. I love my Pixies, and Jirachi is a very good one, especially with Serene Grace. You can't overstate that. Also, Prankster Whimsicott, fun times. And what I think is a very underrated pick in Alolan Persian, it's incredibly fast. You get pivoting with the U-turn. You get Parting Shot. You've got Dark Stab. You've got coverage with Power Gem. I'm very familiar with that. But yeah, it felt really solid, and I like it overall.
Yeah, this team has really incredible pivoting potential, with both Alolan Persian and Silvally getting access to Parting Shot. So a lot of ability to potentially debuff opponents and put yourself in a position to set up and sweep, although not really a ton of setup sweepers on this roster to take huge advantage of that. Honestly, I I'm going to be 100 with you guys. I'm not super familiar with what Galarian Zapdos brings to the table beyond Defiant and a fighting stab that has a chance to, or that lowers defense. Excuse me, I thought I had a chance to paralyze. I was totally wrong. So maybe there is some setup potential there. It's got great typing. It's a phenomenal Pokemon. Please do not misunderstand. Does get U-turn, so it's another part of that, oh god, Volt Turn combo wombo, and it gets bulk up. Okay, so yeah, it is probably like the premier setup sweeper on this team, although Calm Mind Jirachi is also a thing. Nasty Plot Slow King, if you're in a position where you can deal with the speed, is also a thing. But also, like, that's just how I tend to personally play, and not everybody does, and there are definitely like a lot of options to close out games here, including a lot of really powerful Scarfmon that could potentially secure a sweep in the late game, as well as, again, Mamoswine with Ice Shard. Lord knows I have cleaned enough games with Ice Shard Mamoswine to put some respect on his name. This is a really cool team. I will admit some personal bias in that I don't love Silvally. I think that it is a Pokemon that is largely overrated in draft to the degree that, like, yes, it can be any type and it can fill the type hole that you need it to, but that also requires using its item slot, which is a big problem for it. But I mean, ultimately, you have just about everything on this team that you could possibly want. You have solid defensive walls, although I suppose if I'm being prickly and picky about it, like the best defensive walls on this team are special walls in Dragalge and Slowking. I would have liked to see a little bit better physical special defense distribution. But again, I'm nitpicking at this point. This is a truly solid team.
Yeah, I mean, I could have probably ranked this one higher, but I mean, that's true of all of them. And nitpicking is kind of what we're doing for every team. I do want to repeat what you said about Silvally there, where it's probably a bit overrated, and kind of call back to something that we've mentioned a couple times, where we mentioned it with Landorus, where, you know, this can be so many different things, but when you end up drafting it, if it is your only answer to a particular thing, it ends up only being one thing. So the value of that flexibility that it has is then gone. And I say that having drafted Silvally, I think actually more than once, because yeah, it can do so many things, but I needed it to do exactly one thing all of the time, so that's all it could ever do. So that flexibility that makes it so good is not useful anymore, and if I had just drafted something that was better at doing that consistently, rather than could do that and many other things, I would have been better off. I love Whimsicott. It is my favorite Pokemon. Out of all of the 807 million, whatever the fuck we're up to now, Singles is not its place where it shines the most. I recognize this. Doubles is best. It does still have some things it can do, but it's definitely less good here.
I will say, it is entirely possible with this particular roster and this spread of speed tiers that we are going to see a Trick Room Memento Whimsicott into a Nasty Plot Slowking. I don't want to like call out your whole game there, Liger, but like I'm here for it. I'm ready to see it. Let's make it happen.
I will be thrilled if that happens, because that sounds absolutely hilarious, and like that just sounds great. Hey, I have drafted Whimsicott for singles because I love it dearly, but it is very fast. And that's about it.
It goes zoom fast like Sonic, yes.
Yeah, it has a lot of support options, but it doesn't necessarily hold up to do a lot else. And yeah, one of the reasons that this ended up a little bit lower in the rankings is, as you mentioned, it doesn't have a necessarily good physically defensive pivot. A lot of good special defensive ones, Dragalge especially, but nothing necessarily on the physical side that it can really lean on to there. But a lot of good options on this team. I do like it a lot.
All right, now moving on at number 7, we have our good friend Stitchlax and her Mighty Mighty Munchlax in a ranking that I feel is criminally underrated. I actually ranked this team at number 4 on my listing. She landed at number 7 on Pat's and number 6 on Flames. So I'll start here because I love this team. I might love this team more than my own team. So here we have the combination of Celesteela, Hippowdon, and Dracozolt. A combo wombo that is so like beautiful and perfect in every way that I'm furious that I didn't think of it first. First of all, electric ground flying is not like one of the cores we talk about when we talk about draft cores, but it fucking should be. There's multiple immunities in there. They cover each other's weaknesses nicely. Like, it's just a good set of types to have. And these Mon in particular support each other so well. Celesteela is an absolutely A tier Pokemon. S tier, S plus tier. However, the highest tier that there is of our draft Pokemon, it belongs in period 100% of the time. It is excellent. It is a Mon that can be super offensive physically or specially. It can set up and sweep. It can be a core defensive piece on your team and run great support moves. It can do literally everything. And if you build a strong team around it to where it literally can do any of those things, depending on what works in a given week, it's a problem. Consistently, and I feel like Stitch did a really reasonable job of pulling that off with this roster. Supporting it, you have Hippowdon, which Celesteela, 2 weaknesses, right? Fire and electric. Boom. Potent ground wall who's immune to one of those weaknesses. Very good. Hippowdon sets sand, which Celesteela is immune to, takes no damage from. Very good. These Mon just support each other extremely well. And then into the mix we have Dracozolt, who, hey, guess what? That electric weakness from Celesteela, boom, quad resisted. That fire weakness, still resisted. And it gets Sand Rush, which means that not only does it not take damage from Hippowdon's sand, despite being a typing that normally would, it's also fast like Sanic, and gets a move in Bolt Beak that does double the damage if it's faster than what it's hitting. There's just so much synergy in these 3 Mon by themselves that I think is absolutely incredible. The only thing that holds this team back for me is value of down draft picks, which I think probably could have been done better. We have Vaporeon, who is excellent. Absolutely top tier Cleric and Wall, especially if you're getting those attributes from the middle of the draft, which personally is, I feel, where the best value for those things is. So that's where I like to look for them. And I think Vaporeon is a really good pick here. Gives you a top tier bulky water who can wish pass to Celesteela, which is excellent. You've got Tornadus, which I think supports this team also really extremely well, even though it is a duplicate flying type. Gets access to Knockoff, gets access to Hurricane, U-Turn, and Prankster with some really decent Prankster supporting moves. Tailwind, not usually a factor in singles, but if anybody's gonna pull that off, it's motherfucking Tornadus. Can also like run Swagger and just do some cool shit. Speaking of Prankster, we have another one of those in Grimmsnarl, who actually has 2 great abilities in Prankster and Frisk. I really can't overstate how good of an ability in Draft League Frisk is, being able to just come out and just scout what your opponent's item is. It's huge. Grimmsnarl gets access to things like Thunder Waves and dual screens that it can Prankster, or even Scary Face if you want to slow down an electric type, or just not miss, which can be very, very good. And just in general, Fairy Dark I think is a really good typing. And you have Hitmonchan here, which I think Hitmonchan is great for this team. It gives you a really, really good rapid spin option, as well as incredible coverage. You know, there's no fire type on this team at all, but like Iron Fist Fire Punch ain't nothing, right? Gets access to fire coverage, ice coverage, electric coverage, gets access to steel type coverage, and multiple levels of fighting stab depending on your needs and wants in the moment. It's, I think, a really good value on this team, and a low tier pick. Sceptile is here, and Sceptile does some really cool and interesting things. I feel like there is a lot of role overlap between Sceptile and Thundurus, and also the last really important pick I haven't talked about in Scolipede. I feel like really you could have drafted 1 or maybe 2 of these Mon and gotten something bulkier in the place of one of them, probably in the place of Sceptile, a bulkier grass type, I think would have been really, really good. Although that being said, I know that Stitch was sniped multiple times, and I sniped her on Sarina, who was certainly intended for that role and would have fit there, I think, a little bit better. So, you know, that's also always a factor in draft. I like this team a lot. I think that it's really, really strong and potent overall. I love the cheeky mascot pick in Munchlax. I think that it is really, really good. I would wish that it was a little bit more balanced in offensive presence, that it was a little bit more balanced between physical and special. I feel like the most threatening, like, sweeping options on this team and wall breaking options are all physical. I would like to see a special threat of that caliber to match them, which unfortunately just does not exist here. But overall, like, I fucking love this team.
Yeah, it's a real good team. One of the things that really stood out to me is the missing middle speed tiers. Like, she's got 111 in Tornadus, 120 in Sceptile, 112 in Scolipede, and obviously the Sandrush and Dracozolt. But, you know, the next highest I see is
Hitmonchan at 76.
Hitmonchan at 76.
Yep. I played my week 1 match against Stitch yesterday, and I exploited the shit out of that. So, like, yes, that is probably the single most glaring weakness in this team, is just the lack of any representation in the middle speed tiers.
Yeah. Yeah, when I looked at it, you know, I did kind of discount that flying ground electric core, but I mean that's real solid. It is missing other cores, like as you mentioned, there's no fire type, though that can be mitigated with Iron Fist Fire Punch. There's what are we missing? We're missing a Psychic for Dark Fighting Psychic. Even like Bolt Turn, I only found, I think there's only 2 things that really can turn with Tornadus and Vaporeon. Other than that, I'm like, it's solid. It's got an amazing defensive presence between Stila, Vaporeon, and Hippowdon. But, you know, it just kind of, it didn't feel like it was elevated enough for me to put it too much higher.
That's a fair opinion. You know, one thing with our drafts only consisting of 10 Pokemon this time around, we've historically done 11 or 12. You're going to see a lot more overlap in what's used week to week. There's going to be less wild swings and variants. And so one thing I personally looked for this time around is how strong is that top of your draft, right? Like how much does knowing that it's probably going to come every week affect your opponent's ability to prep for it? And that combination of Celesteela, Dracozolt, and Hippowdon is just so incredibly strong that gained a ton of brownie points for me, because she can bring it every week and you still just got to find a way to beat it. And it's not, as someone who just had to do that, it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say, when kind of considering my thing, I like how Pat has like mapped out all the speed tiers and figured out all the types and stuff. I mean, admittedly, I was looking at all the teams at 1 a.m., but I just looked at it and went, I think this is somewhere around the middle. But I didn't recognize necessarily how well Hippowdon worked with Celesteela. I know enough to say, oh, well, hey, Dracozolt has Sandrush or whatever it is, so those work well together. But I didn't see the synergy there. Definitely, though, once we got to this middle section between like my 4 to 8 picks, I think I literally just sat there like moving numbers around, trying to decide who to put where, because I would put somebody in a spot and go like, oh no, I can't put them that low. No, you need to, and I just went back and forth and eventually went, you know what, this is fine. and moved on because there's no good answer. I think I ended up putting Stitch here because of, while she has like this really good core up at the top, there's a lot of type coverage that isn't here. We mentioned like the lack of a fire type. There's no ghost type to block rapid spin if you care about that. Poison type to, necessarily deal with toxic spikes or fairies.
You got your boy Young Scolipede looking you right there in the eye there, Flame.
Yeah.
But yes, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. I love the mascot pick. I recognize that on a 4-week schedule, essentially for this draft, the odds that your E tiers are going to come get significantly lower. Probably would have done Stitch some brownie points if there was something that was even a little bit more threatening in that last slot. But also, like, you love the swagger. You love to see it.
I mean, look at that happy boy.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
How can you say no to that? But yeah, I reasonably think that this whole group could run anywhere from rank 3 to 8, and there's a strong argument for it. And so I can't even remember where you said that I put this team, but it could probably go higher, and I would agree with you. But there's ways that could be improved, and again, I wouldn't be surprised if Stitch looked at who she was facing and what they were drafting and kind of crafted some things around that. And like you said, she definitely had a lot of snipes as well. And yeah, some of the weakness in like that Sceptile pick, we know she had other plans for that slot that would have been better, but that's draft. Sometimes it doesn't go that way.
100%. And I will just point out that our 5 slot through 7 slot are extremely close. So, again, they really could have basically gone any which way. And speaking of which, moving on at number 6, we have our good friend Aliara and the Venomville Vileplume. Now, Aliara drafted Tornadus Therian, breaking with tradition and breaking the heart of his good friend Lando T, drafting his brother instead, alongside Slowbro, Sylveon, Chandelure, which, God, why did we let Ali have fucking Chandelure again? Guys, why? We know better. It's fine.
Make bad decisions.
he also picked up Duraludon, Incineroar, Nidoqueen, Orbeetle, Rotom Mow, and Mineshaw. Pat, buddy, what do you think of Ali's team?
I like it a lot. I know one of his things was he very much wanted a lot of turning, and he did that. He got Tornadus, you've got Incin, you've got Rotom, you've got Mineshaw, who can all turn in some way.
And Slowbro with Teleport, too.
Oh, yeah. Teleport on Slowbro. Does Orbeetle get Teleport?
Orbeetle gets U-Turn.
U-Turn? So there you go. It's very much an in and out. And, of course, I love Sylveon pick. Like the defensive core in this team with like 2 regen mon between Slowbro and Tornadus, and you've got the massive special wall that is Sylveon. You've got a Steel Dragon in Duraludon, Nidoqueen, who's generally very bulky, Orbeetle, who can take a surprising number of hits.
Orbeetle is surprisingly defensive. Yeah, like the typing is not great defensively, but the stats are not bad.
Yeah, and then of course you've got Intimidate, Parting Shot, Incineroar, and Rotom can be bulky if you need it to.
Oh, 100%. And again, there are 3 regenerators on this team. Fucking 3. Mineshaw is not what you would normally consider to be a bulky Pokemon, but it will U-turn out and it will get a little healthier every time, which will negate, entry hazards damage. It'll negate chip. It's not nothing for sure.
Yeah. And one thing I did notice is he has a lot of mid speed tiers. Like you got Torn and Mineshaw as his only ones over 100. So So that could make some problems with some of the faster threats that are running around, or with some standard scarfers. But with the defensive core he has, it might not be too bad to work with.
Yeah, I think that this is a really solid team. It's definitely Allie's play style, which has always been not stally necessarily, but very like defensive and calculated, which this team 100% lends itself to. I love regenerator Pokemon in draft. I almost always have one. In fact, I very intentionally broke from my comfort zone in this draft by not drafting a regenerator pivot. But I think that their value really can't be overstated. And having both Tornadus and Slowbro together, I think is really, really strong here. It's going to be interesting to see how Allie builds from week to week to keep some of these bulkier Mon from becoming setup fodder, to really keep the offensive pressure up. Like obviously pivoting is good and helps put the right Mon in front of things, but that doesn't necessarily help as much if they're already at +2, right? So I that is the biggest problem I foresee from this roster, is just keeping the immediate pressure up to prevent setup threats. But like, again, that's not to say that the potential's not here, because it absolutely is. I'm just curious to see kind of how he executes on that. And also, we let Aliara have goddamn Chandelure again. Why, God, why?
Yeah, I like Aliara's team a lot this time, probably because it doesn't have Legendary Variant. But I will say I did brainstorm a little bit with him earlier on when he was trying to figure out his draft plan, and I did come up with a team that every single Mon had a pivoting move, because that's the kind of shit that I come up with. So that's not what he drafted. But some of those Mon are still on here because that is, part of what he was looking for. I really like this team. You have, Sylveon and Slowbro up top there that have a really good defensive pair there for the physical and special defense, but there's just a lot of good defensive options. There's a lot of good pivoting options here, and there are some potent special threats. I also really like, from a draft perspective, that Aliara was able to pick up Sticky Webs from E tier. Regardless of how you feel about Orbeetle's power level, it's an E tier, and he was able to get Sticky Webs, which is really valuable.
Yeah, and it's really respectably fast too at 90 base speed. And again, its offensive stats aren't crazy, but it also has I think base 120 defense and body press. So that's a thing. Something we pointed out a lot in the lower levels of this power ranking is things where it's just I just when you know that you're about to take a big hit, who do you switch into? And this team is the opposite of that problem, because you have so many options for where to switch, and because so many of them have regenerator, even if you make the wrong call, as long as it's not a fatal wrong call, as long as you have the opportunity to switch back out, you can recover from that in a way that I feel like a lot of those teams couldn't. And that went a long way to pushing Aliara up the list. He did land at number 6 on my personal ranking, as well as on Pat's. So this is right dead center with where we had him. He was up at 4 on your ranking, Flame. And looking at this team and knowing the way that you play, I can definitely see why this one crept up.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is really interesting, and I also want to point out, we had mentioned way back at the beginning, we're not doing a D-League analysis here, but that they could still look at this, and we mentioned in the Discord a while back, specifically talking about Orbeetle, where it's an E tier, but once you get into the draft and actually doing the matches, you can kind of forget about what tier things are. It's really just looking at what is useful for the thing. We have the benefit here of week 1 matches are already done. So Aliara's E tier pick managed to kill Okan's A tier, because it was the right answer at that time. So it's not necessarily, okay, well, it's an E tier, so it's garbage, which is a sentiment that we've had every draft from somebody. There is value to be had all over the place. You just need to look to see what value you need for your team. I think that Aliar did a very good job of finding value in the lower tiers, which is also a thing that kind of put his team higher up on the list for me.
Oh, 100%. And that is really, I think, what separates a good draft from a great draft is how good is the value you got from your lowest tier picks? How well do they fit on your team? And just in general, what is their power level like compared to the rest of that tier? And I think that Ali definitely kind of put on a clinic here. I don't think he did it the best of anyone in this draft, but there's an argument for it, I think. And moving onward at number 5, we have our very own Pat. Hey, Pat, it's you. It's you and your Sin City Giratinas. You landed at 5th on the overall ranking. I ranked you at 7th. I'm sorry, buddy. I don't want to break your heart, but that's where you landed for me. And for Flame, you actually landed at number 3. So I know I asked you first last time, but this is literally your team. So Pat, why don't you tell us about your draft?
So my draft started with a thought, and that thought was, let's just do season 1 again. That was a fun time. So I went and I tried to draft pretty much anything I could from my season 1 team, and obviously making replacements where I needed to. We had Hydrogen stolen from us, so we swapped the hack surface, things like that. I've got a little bit of type overlap. And that happens, you got Psychic and Bikini and Starmie and stuff like that. I have like no weather, no terrain, which happens. It's not really a big thing in my team. I don't have much priority, which is kind of a problem because I'm also missing some of the highest speed tiers. Like I've got 115 with Starmie, and that's where I max out at, which can be a problem, as was shown in my week 1 match. Yeah, I like my team. I really like my team, and I like some of the stuff that I brought in with Araquanid. I love webs. Webs are great. Togekiss is a monster, and Victini just like hits V-Create and kills things. But I really think I could have done a better job at synergizing the team. Like I personally put myself pretty low, because as much as we didn't rank our own teams, I ranked it in my head, and I didn't come out very well against everyone else.
Well, I'm sorry, Pat. I'm not meaning to depress you, my dude. And again, that's kind of the cool thing about our current format, right? Is this is your team for the first 4 weeks. If you're not really happy with the way that you did, you can take what you learned from that and try to improve on it in the next draft. For me, what really stood out was actually some of the same things that stood out with some of the teams that were lower on our list, which is why on my personal list, like you were kind of bunched up with them, is your defensive switch-ins are not as good as I would want them to be. Not that they're terrible, but like your A tier, like your top pick is your Victini, which is weak to water and is weak to ground primarily. Also rock and but water and ground I think are the more common attacking types of its weakness list. And you have you have 2 real like high value will show up earthquake switch-ins in Togekiss, which is immune, and Araquanid, which is reasonably bulky but lacks reliable recovery and will get worn down. Everything else gets hit neutrally by ground. Rotom, of course, has Levitate, but I feel like Rotom Ghost is one of those lower tier picks that can be kind of hard to bring sometimes. Obviously, you can and will prove me wrong on that, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. And yeah, there were just As someone who has used Roserade before in draft and seen both the great and terrible things that it brings, it's unfortunate when your highest picks are weak to ground and your grass type does not resist. Which is my
fair.
like that was my biggest complaint about using Roserade. And so when I see a Victini and Roserade together, I'm, oh no, sweetie, what is you doing? All over the place. That's just kind of where I live. I like a lot of things about this team. I think that Starmie is really, really good here as a rapid spinner, as well as a really fast option. Although again, it kind of becomes one of those too many hats, not enough moves, not enough EVs to go around situations. Because you kind of want it both to be a bulky spinner and also to be like a fast revenge killer, and it can't really do both at once, right? But like you have some really top tier cleaning options on this team. And again, like if this were a full season, I think you'd be a couple of trades and free agent moves away from something really, really good and special here. That's not an option here, but there's enough here that you can still win a couple of games, and you're going to get another chance to try again in a couple of weeks, right?
Yep. And part of it was part of my thought process was, if I make playoffs, I've got some really strong pieces to make my playoff roster too.
Oh, 100%. And just in general, the combination of webs with both Victini and Hydreigon is fucking sick. Like, it's gross. It's so good. Because, like, Victini's, like... The biggest problem with Victini is that he's only 100 base speed, so anything over 100 outspeeds him. Not with sticky webs up, they don't. So that is incredible. I wish there was a little bit better balance on this team and a slightly better spread of defensive typings. But that's something that'll work out in the wash, I think.
Yep.
I ended up putting this pretty high, as you mentioned. I think part of that is that mostly I remember this team. Because I fought this team. And there are so many things on this team that I have had problems with in the past. But I do think that for the problems that you've pointed out, which are definitely valid, that there are a lot of good things here as well. Togekiss, Aggron, and Araquanid really have a lot going for them defensively. Togekiss has a lot of different ways that it can be built. I mean, obviously, there's just with its abilities, Serene Grace or Super Luck.
Yeah.
For some reason, that sounds wrong to me. But the critical hit one. You can build it offensively in those two different ways, but it also has reasonable defensive stats there. Starmie is way more of a threat than I feel like it should be, especially if you have a way to make it fast. Now, back when we faced it, I was always worried about Scarf Starmie, but now it can get Rapid Spin that makes it fast, so it doesn't even need to be Scarf. And obviously combining that with Sticky Webs, potentially from Araquanid, that's just even better. I've never been super impressed with using Victini, but I know that Pat is really fond of it, so he's obviously a lot better at using it than I am, and even I have to admit that its signature moves are stupidly powerful, so it can be really threatening, especially if you can get past that speed tier, whether that's through webs or Scarf or whatever. And I mean, Haxorus and Crocodile are just powerful in their own right. I don't know. I like this team a lot. Like I said, it might just be that I know these Pokemon a lot better from using them and facing them, and I know that from facing Pat's Season 1 team, which this is mostly the same, as close as it can be. There's no forges here for me to face multiple times. But it's good. I like it.
It is good. I did not mean to turn this into the shitting on Pat show. In particular, I will point out Crocodile is an incredible value as a mon that is both an intimidate, like defensive piece, but can also be like a Moxie boosting win con. Like throw a Scarf and Moxie on that thing, come in the late game and just clean up. That is always like Crook is a mon that you can bring every week and do drastically different things with. Like you can't tell anything from team preview when you see Crocodile there, and that's a problem.
Yeah, he's gonna be real good. I've got a lot of plans for him. I know we haven't talked a whole lot about Regigigas. I love Regigigas. I know slow start's bad. He's great.
I will admit that I immediately went, "Why the fuck did you draft Regigigas, Pat? Why? This isn't VGC. You can't slap a Weezing next to him. He's bad, Pat. What are you doing?"
It's funny.
Well, he actually has really respectable defenses too. Like he's base 110 special defense. I don't remember his defense right offhand because I got him in season 2 as a special wall because I needed one, and he's got pretty good coverage and respectable special if you want to run him special, but if he can live after those 5 turns of slow start, that can snowball real quickly too.
I saw a guy who in VGC, I shit you not, was running. Oh god! Well, no, this couldn't have been an official VGC match because of Pokedex numbers, but I don't know what fucking format it was. But he was playing doubles, and he had Regigigas alongside Galarian Weezing, Rego Weezing, and Coughing. Just nothing but neutralizing gas. Deal with it. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Again, there are really strong pieces on this team. I just would have wanted a little bit more synergy to put you up a little higher personally. And I think that you're going to get that as you go, for sure. I think that when you make playoffs, not if, but when, some of these Mon are going to come back alongside new friends that are going to make them much scarier.
Absolutely.
Okay, now our next two are another tie. So coming in in the first slot at number 3 is our good friend Roger M and the Dunshire Dunsparce. Now this is the team that I ranked at number 3, so this is correct, right on the money for me. Pat, they came up at number 4, it looks like for you, and they came up at number 5 for Flame. So Flame, we've been talking for a while, buddy. What do you think of the Dunsparce?
Again, this is another one of those 3 to 7 teams. I have no idea. Like, sure, 5, whatever you say. There are a lot of good Pokemon on this team. I know Roger got the Blaziken, which everyone is really scared of, and we'll see how good it is or isn't. I don't know. Maybe it's a mistake. We'll find out. It'll be great. But Blaziken, Swampert, and Tangrowth as a core is really good to start off. Nihilego and Noivern are powerful threats in their own right. Slurpuff is really weird. I'm never quite sure what to think of it. I know Slurpuff gets the sticky webs, right?
Yes.
And it has the belly drum.
It has belly drum and sticky webs. It has also got Wish and aromatherapy.
Right. So it's kind of hard to necessarily know what that thing is doing, which has some value in itself. You have Indeedee and Uxie there. I think that's kind of a pair that he's working with, potentially. But I think that Indeedee female there could work on its own. We had some conversations about that in the draft chat as to the value of Indeedee female versus Indeedee male and the tiers that it has. Berserker, I haven't been too impressed with in the past, but I don't know if that's maybe just me not using it well. But I don't necessarily love it as a steel type. Porygon 2 though is very good. Is a really good defensive option there, though it does have the Eviolite problem of what its item is, and if you can knock it off, then it's much less of a good defensive switch-in. There isn't necessarily a ton of synergy on this team. It's not like he's running weather or anything like that.
My sweet summer child.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's nothing immediately obvious of clearly he's built a rain team, so this and this and this and this works together. But I think that these work really well together, and that these are all just good Pokemon. You got a good draft team. I don't know. I looked at it and it looked good.
So the real strategy, the big strategy to be aware of, or the big synergy, I guess I should say, is the combination of that Indeedee with the Blaziken. Blaziken was such a high value pick and turned so many heads because of its hidden ability, Speed Boost, which means that after a couple of turns, it becomes a nigh unrevenge killable monster, where it's just gotten so fast that nothing will be faster than it. Admittedly, it needs like 2 or 3 turns of Speed Boost to outspeed Regieleki, because Regielecki's stupid.
Right.
But
a million speed.
but like otherwise, like you really like your best bet after like 2 turns of stopping a Blaziken is either just having a wall that is so potent that it can't break it, or priority. So having the option for Psychic Terrain on this team is just really important and supports Blaziken so well for in-game scenarios. And also, obviously, as you mentioned, like, yes, provide some offensive potency to things like Uxie, which is good, as well as other things that just have psychic coverage, like the Nihilego and the Porygon 2. Can take advantage of the Psychic Terrain, and so can the Indeedee itself. Like, Indeedee female is a little bit less offensive than Indeedee male is, but I mean, still, like, you slap a scarf on that boy in terrain and it's gonna hurt. It's really good. Swampert, Tangrowth, and Porygon 2 is an incredible defensive core, frankly. Swampert gained so much from getting Flip Turn in Generation 8. It's stupid how good Swampert is with Flip Turn. And there is like a really respectable Volt Turn core on this team, with the Blaziken, the Swampert, and the Noivern all being able to U-turn and Flip Turn and all that good stuff. As well as, I'm pretty sure Berserker gets U-turn as well.
I think, does Porygon get Full Switch?
It gets Teleport.
I get Teleport. There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, Tangrowth is a really good like regenerator pivot here as well. And again, you've got a couple of really important mon in the Blaziken and the Nihilego with pretty glaring ground weaknesses. And you've got Tangrowth, which is maybe the best Earthquake switch-in that has ever existed. Especially because, like, a lot of times you're like, well, no, a flying type would be better because it's immune, and that's true. But a lot of times the mon that know Earthquake also know Stone Edge. And Tangrowth just goes, I don't care. I'm fat grass. You can deal with that. So yeah, like there's a lot to love here. I think this is a really, really potent team. I ranked it at number 3, and what really sets it apart from the number 2 and number 1 picks on my personal list are value out of the bottom tier picks. And don't get me wrong, I think Roger got good value out of his bottom tier picks. I think that Slurpuff is a great value. I think that Noivern, again, is really fast and brings Frisk, which is really cool. And Berserker, I think, for an E tier, is really reasonable and usable. But the big standout difference for me between this team and the teams that I have at number 2 and 1 are that I feel like the teams that I have ranked higher just got like the most value possible out of their lowest draft picks. But this is a very good team. This is a great draft team.
It very much is, and I actually just got my ass handed to me by it yesterday.
Sorry, Pat.
But yeah, it's real good. I really, really like Swampert getting access to Flip Turn. Like Flip Turn in general has really boosted the Volt Turn core, which is awesome. I like the defensive core of Swampert, Tangrowth, Porygon 2. They're very good. Nihilego and Noivern being the only ones over 100 speed tier is not ideal, but as you said, we have Speed Boost Blaziken, who's it's 1 turn to be very good, and after 2, it's a steamroll. And of course, you always have Unburdened Slurpuff if you really need it. So, like, speed tiers can be worked with pretty easily within this team. You've got a couple of hazard options with rocks and toxic spikes, and one thing I saw was kind of a low amount of removal.
Yes,
for hazards.
that is valid.
Yeah, you've got Defog on Noivern, and I think Blaziken gets Defog.
What the fuck? What the actual? Don't that can't be true. What the fuck is Blaziken do? That's like
It's a bird.
I mean, admittedly, Conkeldurr gets defogged now. Like, what is he doing? Just farting?
It's default?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Yes, man. Okay, Blaziken does not fart to defog. That is
Okay.
fake news.
Blaziken's a bird, at least. I could see that.
Yeah, yes.
All right.
Famous flying birds, chickens.
It's, whatever. It doesn't have to fly. It's a bird.
Look, if a guy who holds concrete blocks can get defogged,
Again, he has to just be farting. There's no other explanation.
Yeah. But anyway, so only defog on Noivern and Nihilego to pick up toxic spikes. That's kind of rough for hazard removal.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this is a team that is not particularly vulnerable to Stealth Rock, which may have been a consideration there. Like the only Mon that is actively weak to it on this entire roster is Noivern, who can very easily just hold the heavy duty boots and probably will almost exclusively. But like, yes,
Yeah.
that is a notable weakness of this roster.
Yeah, other than that, I really like this team. Yeah, it's good. It's good, and it's very strong and threatening and can snowball very easily. It's a bad time.
Yeah, anytime you're combining a speed boost option with a beast boost option, you're gonna have a bad time for sure.
Yeah.
Now our other team that is tied at number 3 is my personal choice for number 1, although that is by like literally a hair's breadth. Like you could knock one of these teams over and the other one would just take its spot. Like they're very evenly matched. But my choice for number 1 was our good friend Claude 9 and the Republic City Fire Ferrets. Now Claude drafted Dragapult, Clefable, Mandibuzz, Keldeo, Metagross, Arcanine, Articuno, Stunfisk, Miltank, and Gourgeist. So just quickly off the bat, this team, Claude could have been putting on a clinic with this team on layering speed tiers because it's fucking beautiful. It is absolutely fucking beautiful. If you look at the speed tier distribution of this team, he's got obviously faster than the speed of fucking sound with Dragapult at 142. You've got Keldeo at 108, Miltank at 100, which is important. Like something that's frequently overlooked when you're actively trying to manage your speed tiers is having something right at 100 so that base 100s have to run max speed or they risk you outspeeding them. And so having something that's above 100 and then also at 100 is really, really good. And we pull that off here. We've got a 95 in Arcanine. We've got an 85 in Articuno, an 84 in Gourgeist, an 80 in Mandibuzz, a 70 in Arcanine, a 60 in Clefable, and a 32 in Stunfisk. So you have your very fast option in Dragapult, your very slow option in Stunfisk, and almost every 10 in between has representation. It's a thing of beauty. Like it put a tear in my eye. It's so fucking good.
Yeah, that was definitely something I noticed. Another thing I noticed is that he has a bunch of immunities. Like there's 2 normal fighting immunities. You've got a dragon immunity. You've got poison immunity. You've got multiple ground immunities, I think. Yeah, you've got multiple ground immunities. You've got a ghost immunity with Miltank. Like it felt like there was a very good mix of physical and special attacking options. You've got priority. You've got hazard removal. You've got wish passing. This is a very good team.
It's extremely well built. I have to play it in a couple of weeks, and so I'm staring directly at my own doom. Again, there's a lot to love here. The Arcanine and the Metagross picks in the middle draft, I think in particular, are very good. The combination of Dragapult and Clefable is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, these are two of the Pokemon that run OU, and they both fell to Cloud, which is really good. I really love the Articuno pick, a Pokemon that has had new life breathed into it by the existence of heavy-duty boots and the fact that it no longer just takes half its health on switch in due to Stealth Rocks every fucking time, can now actually come in and do something, and I think is actually a really reasonably powerful ice type, and a really good value for its tier level. And again, in general, my top two picks did such a good job of getting value from their low tier pickups, because Articuno, Stunfisk, Miltank, and Gourgeist are just all incredible Pokemon. They all provide at least one type that the team was otherwise missing, that provides some degree of value. They're all high power options for the tiers that they're in. And we've got a couple of new immunities for the team from those low tiers. So really great job overall. I am not looking forward to playing against this team. Now, with that being said, I ranked this team at number 1. Pat ranked them at number 2. Again, right up there. Flame Buddy, you ranked this team at number 9, my dude.
I don't know. Because, I listen to what you're saying. It all makes sense. And I remembered that I put it fairly low, and I don't know why.
That's fine. You were a very sleepy man. You have twins. You do whatever you want to do, my guy. But
I don't know. Just looked at it and I'm like, for some reason, I'm like, I don't know. I don't like it that much.
It was the Stunfisk. The Stunfisk got you. You were like, what the fuck is this thing?
Probably. And I don't know. A lot of these Pokemon, like some of these are things that have disappointed me in Nuzlocke, so that might have been part of it. Like the Gourgeist and the Mandibuzz in particular, I looked at them and I'm like, oh, fuck you. I have no idea why it's so low on my list, to be entirely honest. It really shouldn't be, because, it is very well balanced. And like I said, I didn't look at speed tiers, so I didn't know anything about that. I didn't really look at the types and do any sort of analysis like that. It was just kind of looking over the teams and doing a general feel, so I didn't recognize oh, hey, look at all of these immunities and all of that. But I mean, I know well enough that Clefable is very powerful. Obviously, Dragapult's very good. Everyone's all over themselves about it. Arcanine has always been, a solid pick with Intimidate, and it's got a bunch of kind of different things that it can do.
Notable, Arcanine can also run Flash Fire, so that's another immunity on this team, potentially at least.
I know Keldeo hasn't worked out for Pat in the past, but that's pretty much all I know about it. I know it's theoretically good, but I've never really looked into it a ton. It's got a lot of floof. I give it that. But I don't know. Mandibuzz has never struck me particularly well as a defensive pivot, even though I know it's theoretically that good of one, and that might be just kind of my fairy type bias, because I just see it getting hit with the Moonblast and going, my face and body. But I don't know. It's a good team, and I have no idea why it's so low. So I'm prepared to get yelled at, but I have no defense.
It's fine. It is a testament to how good this team is that you ranked it in the bottom quarter and it still made it up to number 3.
That's fair.
But yeah, there's absolutely no reason or excuse why I am above this point. I am so sorry. I do not deserve this. And speaking of that, number 2, we have our good buddy Sparky and the Thunderers from Down Under Us, whom I ranked at number 2. Pat ranked at number 1, very defensively. Again, I literally could have flipped a coin between Claude and Sparky. Both of these teams are so good. And once again, Flame, with a little bit less faith in this particular core, ranked down at number 7. Flame, do you want to talk about this team a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I definitely remember parts of why this team is good. Excadrill and Gigalith over there on the right, I recognize as very powerful kind of group there. Definitely having a way to give that Excadrill sand without having to manually set it is powerful. And I'm not sure necessarily what else the sand might be doing. I'm not going to make the mistake of saying that it doesn't do anything else because, as we've learned, I don't know everything about what's going on here. You have some strong defensive options here as well. Melodic in particular stands out to me as one that is just, a well-known sort of just even from gameplay bulky water option that can really do a lot of good there. I kind of didn't see a lot in Wheezing, but I also didn't remember the whole neutralizing gas thing or any of that, so it probably has more tools in Gen 8 that I'm just not thinking about. Rotom Fan is definitely always reasonable and good. Rotom Fan always seemed to me to be kind of one of the lower options as far as the forms go, because its secondary typing isn't necessarily doing a lot for it. It's already got the Levitate to immune out the ground. Its flying type is giving it a weakness to electric that its electric type makes a neutral, and I don't know that that flying type is helping it in a lot of cases necessarily, but I think it makes it quad-resist steel, so a little bit there. But Rotom's always solid value, so you get a lot of utility there. Tapu Lele is very good. I don't know necessarily what it's synergizing with here, though I'm sure that it's something, again. But even without any synergies, I think it's just powerful enough on its own. Psychic Fairy is a type that they've done a lot of in recent years, but Tapu Lele is probably one of, if not the best of them, just in its ability to set terrain and then abuse it endlessly. And I'm sure it got the Psychic Terrain tutor move to make things explode and do terrible, awful things. So, Blacephalon is a powerful sweeping option that can really get out of control if you don't get it under control immediately, so always something to watch out for. I don't know anything about Zarude. I know it's the mythical Pokemon in Generation 8, I know it's Grass Dark, and that's pretty much it. So
Can I just point out that Sparky drafted both Zarude and Sandstorm?
You can, and thank you. That's awesome. He should probably be a spot higher just for that. That's hilarious.
I feel like you hit on most of it there, Flame.
Yeah.
Like the really cool synergy for me is the fact that, once again, just like with Roger's team, there are a lot of really fast things on this team. Excadrill and Sand go burr. But so does Zarude. Zarude is a very fast Pokemon, and so is Blacephalon. And these are Mon that are very susceptible to being revenge killed by priority, and having access to the Psychic Terrain from Tapu Lele offers really good team support, in addition to just the raw offensive threat that Tapu Lele herself it provides, which is significant. Like, Tapu Lele is a huge problem, but also supports this team well because it is stupid fast, frankly, when activated. Again, one thing I really like is the value in the low tier picks here, with Dredigan, who is a really reasonably respectable defensive mon with rough skin, gets access to Stealth Rocks, gets access to Glare to paralyze things. You got Piloswine, who's another low tier rocker who's really reasonably powerful for value. Wheezing is a really strong defensive wall for the cost investment of a D tier pick, and yes, gets multiple like useful abilities. Obviously, Levitate on a poison type is really good, giving it only one effective weakness to psychic type, or you can run like neutralizing gas, which then makes Wheezing a grounded poison, so it can absorb toxic spikes as well as canceling out troublesome abilities from your opponent's side of the field. Melodic, I think, gains a lot of value in draft format from the fact that it has two really strong abilities in the form of Marvel Scale, which boosts its defenses when it's status, So you can run that in conjunction with like a flame orb to make it really, really bulky. Or if you're up against a team that's running like a lot of intimidate options, for instance, you can run it as competitive and have it get special defense boosts on stat drops and become really offensively threatening very quickly. Rotom Fan, for my money, is maybe the best value Pokemon in the E tier. It is one of the worst forms of Rotom, but you are still getting a form of Rotom for an E tier pick, and it is frankly incredible. I drafted it in Season 1, and I brought it to nearly every match because Rotom is just really, really strong, and getting that value that far down in the draft is huge. Again, I ranked this team at number 2. It was only not number 1, really because I was still in shock and awe of just the beauty of the speed tier spread that Claude put together. But both of these are absolutely incredible teams.
Yeah, that pretty much covers what I had for this team too. Like, I really, really like the Psychic Terrain synergy. One of the very few things that I had with it is that its highest speed tier was that 107 Blacephalon. So that's not ideal, but it's not hard to work with that, especially, you've got Glare on Druddigon, you've got Key Wave running around. Yeah, it's a very good team.
Yeah, it is extremely good, which is why I am ashamed to say that entirely undeservedly in our very first power ranking of the season, my Indianapolis Zolts have taken the number 1 spot, which I do not feel like I deserve even a little bit. Again, I did not rank myself, but if I had, I would have ranked probably somewhere around 4th or 5th on my own list. I ranked 3rd on Pat's, and I ranked 1st on Flames. Flame Buddy, I appreciate the faith that you apparently have in me, so why don't you tell me about my own team, please?
Okay, well, I don't know. I mean, it's your team. You made Pat talk about his team. Why don't you tell us about your team, and then I'll tell you why I like it.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair, I guess. So I approach this draft really differently than how I've done drafts in the past. Historically, I've come in with like a really firm plan, and this time I just didn't. I had a list of Mon that I would like to use either in this draft or a future one, and some strategies that I thought worked well with them, and I just kind of went off of that. I took Alolan Ninetales with my first overall pick, which is kind of high for that Pokemon, but I really wanted to use it. Both because like Aurora Veil is really good, and it's certainly the premier Aurora Veil setter. Also just to have weather control, and just in general, I think what sets Alolan Ninetales apart from a lot of other like weather control mon is how it can both be really good supportively with things like Aurora Veil and Hypnosis, but also really, really like surprisingly offensively potent, as evidenced by the fact that after week 1 it is our I-League KO leader. Proof of concept right there, ladies and gentlemen. I also knew that I really wanted, with that Aurora Veil option, to run a couple of setup sweepers that would really benefit from being behind Veil. So things that are maybe a little bulkier than your average setup mon that might need maybe even a couple more turns of setup, but that can definitely utilize that Veil to get that benefit, which is a big part of why we picked up Blastoise, which has been on my list of draft mon I'd like to use for a long time anyway, but which gained access to Shell Smash in Generation 8, which I wanted to use in conjunction with the Ninetales, as well as Kommo-o, who of course can set up with a whole variety of cool moves that I'm looking forward to exploring. I also just wanted a fast electric mon, and I actually waited until the very end of the draft to pick one up because there are a lot of them in A tier and most of them were still on the table, so I felt like I could wait. But ultimately with our last pick, we picked up Regieleki, whom I'm very pleased with. If I'm being entirely honest, I think that Zeraora probably would have filled the slot better, would have provided more valuable coverage and more offensive pressure, but I've never used Regieleki before, which made him appealing to me. And also, Zappy Boy Go Zoom. He's so fast. He's so stupidly fast. And that gives me a level of speed control that is frankly outrageous. Stitch had to run Scarf on her Sand Rush Mon to outspeed Regieleki. Like, let that sink in for a minute. She scarfed a Sand Rush Pokemon because she's like, well, yeah, it's the only way I could outspeed Aleki. Aleki is the type of Mon that demands you prep against it, and because it demands that level of prep, that's something that I can exploit in my own preparation. And that was a big justification for drafting it all together. I also picked up Melmetal in the second round because I got to the second round and Melmetal was still there, and I was like, well, this seems like a mistake someone made. Clearly, this is for me. And in hindsight, I probably would not have drafted those two Mon together if I had made the plan out beforehand because of shared weaknesses and everything that goes along with that. But I love them both, and I'm excited that they're on the team. I did know that with our defensive backbone being Melmetal and Blastoise, two Mon that are very reasonably bulky, but which lack inborn native recovery, I was going to need a strong cleric to pass wishes and keep everything healthy, and I could not have done much better in that role than Umbreon, whom I'm very happy I was able to snag. And then from there, I was mostly just picking up roles and Mon that I knew that, or roles and types that I knew that I needed to have on the team, or at least really wanted to have on the team. We completed our Firewater Grass Core with Sarina, who I think is really, really good here as a slow pivot to partner with our Regieleki, as well as just a reasonably bulky grass type with good offensive and support options. And then Rapidash, who I felt like was a really good budget option for an offensive fire type. We picked up Braviary to give us a flying type, as well as a defiant user, which I feel like is reasonably important. I've got several physical threats on the team, and just wanted to have something that could punish opponents for trying to lower stats in general. And then I really needed an electric immunity of some variety. Again, probably another reason that Zeraora would have been a better electric type than Regieleki for this team overall, but I picked up Marowak out of E tier for our ground type option, which I feel like gave about the best possible value for that typing I could get out of that tier. I don't think I got as good a value out of the D and E tiers as either Claude or Sparky did, or even Roger. Frankly, I think that number 4 is probably a more fair place for my team to land if I even go that high. But I do think that it's really strong. I feel like the synergy between Alolan Ninetales, Blastoise, Kommo-o, and Melmetal is really, really strong. And I'm looking forward to seeing how far I can push this squad.
That's fair. If I'm being honest, it's probably just that you have Alola, Ninetales, and Kommo-o, and I probably just stopped looking at that point. But I do really like your team. Particularly, I think, like you said, Alola Ninetales is a very good option. And I like that, you have this weather option and you're using it primarily as a self-contained sort of thing. The only thing that necessarily cares about having the hail going on is Alola Ninetales itself. You want to get Aurora Veil up with it and be able to hit blizzards with it. But once you have that veil up, that's really good for, anything on your team. Yes, name any Mon that wants to take half damage, But particularly being able to, like you said, set up with these various Mon behind Aurora Veil, I think is a really interesting option, and especially when you have potent threats like Kommo-o, who you can set up in a variety of ways, and potentially even set up all of your stats, which is something that I've wanted to do. So if you get to do that, I'm going to enjoy seeing that. And Melmetal behind an Aurora Veil just sounds awful, honestly. You pointed that out, and that just sounds terrible. I don't want to ever have to deal with that. And yeah, even just in your kind of lower end there, Umbreon is great just as a cleric and a defensive option. Being able to pivot in and pass around wishes and use synchronize to kind of pass status that you can swap into potentially, and it's just very good defensively, and picking up Serena, which as that bulky grass type, and Queenly Majesty, or whatever the hell it is. Doesn't that prevent priority?
It negates priority, yes, which can be very useful.
Yeah, it's not necessarily psychic terrain, but you do have an option there to kind of mess with plans in that way. And yeah, having Braviary with Defiant there to mess with Intimidate, I really like as well. And yeah, I mean, now that we've talked about everything, do I necessarily think that you are the number one team? I don't know, probably not, but I do like your team. So, I don't know, fuck you, deal with it.
Well, thank you. I also like my team.
Oh, and Regieleki does go Zoom, and I think that it is hilarious, honestly, if nothing else. And yeah, just, I can't imagine having to prep and go, this thing has 200 speed. That's 200, right?
It's base 200, yes.
Nope. That's insane. Like, I would probably just go, okay, so that outspeeds, and we have to do that. Like, because you can't, I can't imagine. That just sounds awful. And I think that having that really just puts your opponents in a rough spot from the beginning of prep to go, okay, this thing is immediately faster than anything I can possibly have. I mean, like you said, having to put a scarf on your Sand Rush Mon. That just sounds terrible. So.
Yeah, I really like this team too. Like, Melmetal is really cool. Like, I've never used him, but he's everything I want in a steel type. Obviously Regieleki just go Zoom all the time. Alolan Ninetales is awesome. Blastoise is really cool. Both, as the Shell Smasher, as a defensive pivot. He picked up Flip Turn 2.
Yes.
Which is really cool. Like, Umbreon is awesome. He's very good. Cleric, everything. Komao, I think he's probably the weakest part of this top part of your draft. But it's still Komao, so that's not saying a great deal. What that says is the rest of the top of your draft was very strong. I love Serena. Serena's great. I like the utility in Trop Kick, Rapid Spin, Aromatherapy, very good. Braviary, super strong, gives you a defog option. I think the weakest part of your draft are your last two, Marowak and Rapidash. I just don't see how they come over someone else on your team.
So I don't want to give away my strategies, but at least one of those Mon I drafted with a specific matchup in mind. So
and that's totally
one
fair.
of them will come. I will promise you that. Stay tuned. One of these Mon is going to come.
That's totally fair. Your speed tiers, you've got a lot of good stuff in the middle section in the 70s, 80s. You've got Rapidash and Ninetales over 100, Melmetal in that low end, and of course Eleki at 200, which just kind of screwed everything else. It's hard to be like, oh, you've got real bad speed tiers when you can outspeed literally everything.
Most choice scarfers. Yes.
Yeah.
It's
yeah, like I
dumb.
looked it up. I want to say max speed Eleki hits something like 560 effective speed.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
Can you outspeed Trick Room?
No, you can't circle back around.
Yeah,
This isn't Gen 2. You don't
insane.
go too high to where you go low again.
yeah, but yeah, other than that, I really like your team. I think, like, obviously I ranked a couple of people higher than you. I think they just got more overall value.
I mean, that's fair. So do I.
Yeah. But I love your team. It's great.
What I like about my team from my perspective as the person piloting it and coaching it is I can bring a Lecky, Ninetales, Blastoise, Kommo-o any given week, and you as my opponent have no idea which one of those mon I'm going to lean into as a win con. Like, Ninetales could be supportive or could be offensive. Blastoise could be like bulky Rapid Spin or Shell Smash. Kommo-o could be like Stealth Rocks support or could be Clangorous Soul. Like, there's no way of knowing, and I love that shit. I eat it up like grapes.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's gross. I love it.
All right, guys. Well, that is our first draft power ranking. I do say first, of course, because this is only the first draft of the series. We will be back after our second draft to go over those rankings, and hopefully, if you're not super thrilled with where you landed this time, you'll improve in the next one, or at least our perception will improve. Like, I will point out, the last time we had a community draft ranking, we weren't the ones doing it, but the last time we had a community draft ranking, the guy who was absolutely bottom tier went, I think, 9-0 before he got his first loss to the season. So this is all speculation. This is whose line is it anyway. The score is made up and the points don't matter. But hopefully you picked something up from this. You learned something about draft format and at least the way that we approach it. I hope you've enjoyed this very long video. I'm going to get out of here because I have work in the morning. As always, I have been Jolly by Nature. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see y'all next time.
See y'all later.
See you.
Hey, what's up, everybody? You made it to the end of the video. That is so awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Be sure to click the like and subscribe buttons so you stay up to date on what I and my co-hosts are doing right here on the Blastburn Radio YouTube page. Also, be sure to check out Blastburn Radio Podcast, which is available wherever fine pods are casted, as well as at our website down below at blastburnradio.com. But yeah, we'll be back next time, and I hope to see you there. Take care.